It's 2022 and you're thinking about, is this the time to start building your startup? It's very challenging to raise any funds right now, and inflation is going up, interest rates are going up. There's lots of doom and gloom in the market around investors, worried about sort of losing future money, and are they all going to crash? And I think back now to the early days of technology, and so 2005, 2008, it was so much harder to build a business in those days. Even 2010, 2012 in Australia, there was no VCs. They just didn't exist. And so you had to build a business and you had to make it profitable as soon as you possibly could. And what we've got used to over the last sort of 10 years is that you were able to raise investor money and you could just keep on raising more and more money. You didn't have to worry about becoming profitable. And so you had this huge luxury over the last 10 years. And suddenly the tide has changed and investors actually now want to actually see a return on their money, which is, pretty obvious. So it's not the worst time to start a startup. It's definitely harder right now to start a startup and to grow your startup and to raise funds for your startup. But it's still much, much easier today to build a startup from scratch. You can do that without any capital. There's so many tools that are out there today to make things so much easier. Building a website, writing code, it's significantly easier today than what it was 10 years ago. And you don't need huge amounts of money to build your first version of an idea. And the key is you want to build that first version, you want to test it, and you want to prove out that you can actually do something and you can actually make the unit economics of what you're doing make sense. And so, which means when you sell something, you're actually going to make a profit. And if you can do that, you'll be able to find investors. And if not, you can figure out ways to actually fund it yourself so that you can actually continue to grow this business and actually make it profitable. So when I say fund it yourself, what does that mean? So there's lots of different ways of being able to earn money, and whether that's, you're doing ride sharing on the side, you might be doing, courier on Zoom to you, or you might be actually being able to do some other projects that are on the side where companies are actually paying you to do that work. And so the early days of building sort of my earlier businesses, I didn't have the ability to go out and raise capital. And so I would do software projects for companies where we would go out and build some specific bespoke software for them. It was really painful. You had to build something that was very specific to a particular company. You weren't able to reproduce that code and use it for other different businesses, but you were paid, lots of money for being able to do that. And so what I was able to do at the time was actually do these projects and then take the money that I was earning from that and then put it into building a product, and the product that I was able to then sell to lots and lots of companies around the world. And ultimately that business ended up getting acquired. And so thinking about it as, doing project work is a way of being able to actually raise funding is a great idea. Even building websites for companies. There are still so many small businesses out there that have terrible websites, and they need to, particularly if we're going into a recession right now, they need to be able to differentiate themselves to competitors. And website is particularly for these small businesses, is a great way of being able to do that. Teaching them how to make sure the Google profile looks good. There's lots of things that you can do pretty easily if with a little bit of smarts and knowing some basics of marketing, that you can help these small businesses and sell them the new website, maybe some marketing advice, and use that money that you're making to then go off and build your product. So I certainly wouldn't think, now's not the time to go and build a startup. There's so many tools available to help you get going. And it's a matter of real persistence in sort of figuring out what you need to do to actually get you the least amount of money to be actually build your startup and build it, as leanly as you possibly can. And that's the key. And don't think about building a startup where you need to go and raise millions of dollars to actually see it to get to profitability. That's not the time. Now's not the time to do that. And it's around, really focusing on building a lean startup, which is what we had to do in the early, 2010 or earlier in building a startup. There's a world of opportunities that are out there right now. And I think what you'll find is the companies that start now and are successful throughout this period, and whether this recession happens or doesn't happen or does happen over the next year or 2 or 3 years, what you'll find is the companies that get through this period are going to be super successful in the future. And so ultimately, this is going to be a unique time in history where we'll look back in 10 years and go, okay, it was really hard doing business today, but geez, look at these big companies that were able to be built throughout this period because they could operate in a really lean environment. They didn't need to raise huge amounts of money, and they were successful, and their competitors weren't. And I think that's what you're going to see throughout this period in 2022 and maybe into 2023 and maybe 24. But hopefully we see an improvement in the economies and whatnot, and interest rates, and inflation not going out of control. So it's definitely interesting times. But certainly, if you've got an idea and you're thinking about starting a startup, I wouldn't think about it not doing anything in 2022 because of what's happening in the markets today. People still need to transact and still need to buy, and businesses need to be efficient. And there's lots of different ways you can do that by valuable services, but also in providing software, etc. So good luck, and now's the time to think about building your next startup. If you're thinking about it, good luck.